So how do we find the midpoint of a segment? So I've got several examples here for you, and they start off easy and get progressively more difficult. And hopefully you can start to see a pattern on the coordinates we start with and the coordinates of the midpoint. So for example, in problem 1, 0, 4 to 6, 4, that's the segment. The midpoint is going to be 3, 4. So look at 1, 2, 3, and 4. Pause the video, look at that work, and try to figure out what is the pattern going on here. How do I start with endpoints and I get to a midpoint? All right, now, after thinking about that, hopefully you'll see that where I start and where I end, think about how you move. So from like E to F, I go over 6, up 6 to go from 2, 2, 8, 8. All right, so if I go over 6, that's from endpoint to endpoint. I don't want to go endpoint to endpoint. I want to go to the midpoint. So instead of going over 6, what if we just went over 3? And instead of going up 6, what if we just went up 3? So starting from E, if I go over 3, up 3, that's going to be the midpoint. I can take how I move, the over and the up, I can cut that in half and then move, and I'll figure out where to end up at the midpoint. Okay? And I can also do it conceptually if I have points that don't lie on the graph. Like in number 6, negative 12, 25, and negative 4, negative 13 would lie off of my normal coordinate grid. Okay, so I can think about this conceptually. How do I move from negative 12 to negative 4? How much am I moving? I'm moving positive 8. Okay, so I'm moving positive 8. So instead of moving positive 8 to go from endpoint to endpoint, to go to the midpoint, I'm going to move positive 4. So starting at negative 12, if I add 4 to it, I'm going to end up at negative 8. Okay? What about for the y coordinates? If I start at 25 and I go to negative 13, that's moving down 38. So instead of moving down 38 to go to endpoint, I only want to go to the midpoint. I want to move down 19. So if I start at 25 and I move down 19, I'm going to end up at positive 6. Okay? So the formula for midpoint, you can think about it conceptually like that. For how you move, cut it in half. All right, that's a good way to think about it. But the formula, if you've got two endpoints, x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, to get the x coordinate of the midpoint and the y coordinate of the midpoint, you are going to add together the x's and divide by 2, add together the y's, divide by 2. Okay? So this first coordinate, that's how you get the x coordinate of the midpoint. This second formula, y1 plus y2 divided by 2, that's how you get the y coordinate of the midpoint. All right, so go back now, look at these problems and see how we can use this midpoint formula in order to find the coordinates of the midpoint. We can think conceptually on how we're moving, and then we cut it in half, or we can use this midpoint formula where we find the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates, and that's going to be our midpoint. Okay, so we got two different ways to think about that, conceptually and also using our formula. So now that we've got both the Pythagorean theorem and distance formula to find the length of the segment, and we also have the midpoint formula, try these try nows. Question 1, find the length of it, exact and approximate, so radicals, and then using our calculator to get decimals. Number 2, find the midpoint. And then number 3 is definitely a quiz or test question because I'm giving you the midpoint and one of the endpoints. You got to figure out how to work back. work backwards to find the other endpoint. So that is definitely one where you can use the formula or you can think about it conceptually. So pause the video here, try those, and then I'll throw up the answers. Okay, so there's the answers for the first two. Green is approximate, orange is exact. There's number 2. I use the formula for this, or you can think about it conceptually. If I'm going from -1 to 4, that's going to the right 5, so I want to go half of that, so I only want to go over 2.5. And then for the y coordinates, I go from 0 to 2. So I move up 2. Half of that is 1. So I'm going to go over 2.5, up 1, and that's going to be the midpoint. Coordinates 1.5, comma 1. Okay? And then number 3, I have the work for if you're using the formula and if you think about it conceptually. Okay, so for the formula, we don't have the coordinates of k, so we don't know our x2, y2. So I'm going to take the formula for a midpoint formula, plug in what you know, solve for what you don't know. Okay, so it might help if I label these. You know the coordinates of one of the endpoint, you know the coordinates of the midpoint. Plug those numbers in, solve for what you don't know. Okay? Check out those you try nows, try your practice problems, bring your questions to me, let me know what you need. All right, have a good one.